Alrighty then, what's happening, everybody? Welcome to another ASC Success webinar. This one is episode 46, and now I'm getting echo, forgive me. This one's 46, and we are going to be talking about how to build and deepen trust. We have an amazing guest with us. It's Sam Varnerin. She is a friend of ours, from our WDS days. She's an amazing person. She's going to be sharing her expertise. And I'm going to read a little bit of Sam's bio, and then we're going to turn it over to Sam to introduce herself, because there's no one better than yourself to introduce yourself, so I don't just mess it up. So I'm just being completely honest. But Sam is a cuddle therapist, and has had her practice since 2015. Sam is based out of Boston. Her private practice is called Snuggle with Sam. She's learned what creates relationships and what burns them to the ground by putting herself out there in her work and in her personal life, absorbing training programs from organizations that tried to figure it out before her. Trying things out that she's learned, and attempting to overcome her awkward ex-engineer ways and making a million mistakes to learn from. So we can all relate to that. And as far as Sam's certification, Sam is trained and been certified through Cuddleist, the Connection Institute, also known as TCI, and Cuddle Sanctuary. And so Sam also runs her own 7-week mentorship program called Snuggle School. She's a contributor for the 2018 International Standard Code of Ethics for Professional Cuddlers. She deeply emphasizes for those isolated periods of time, and self-published her own book on Amazon in 2020 called Happy While Hermiting Handbook, a guide for your isolation. So anyways, everyone, warm welcome for Sam. Hello, Sam. And I want to turn it over to you to give us a little bit more detail about who you are, where you came from, and then we're going to dive in.
Well, thank you, first of all. And also, I usually try to make my bios as interesting as possible, so the people reading them are actually not bored to tears. So the fact that you managed to do the whole thing without laughing, I'm impressed, Gary, and thank you. But honestly, I think you nailed most of it. Essentially, it's like there's a lot of nuances around me and my life that you more or less took care of. But yeah, the big thing to emphasize is that I am an ex-engineer. So that gave me a lot of experiences with people that really didn't understand how to navigate things socially. And I've learned over the years, and so have my friends, who some of them are engineers, some of them are not. And that diversity in people around me and the experiences that they have and how they interact with the world has really helped me figure out a little bit better how to show up. And at the same time, some of those relationships don't exist anymore, which is unfortunate. And some of them were because trust was broken. Sometimes it was my fault. So I like to think that I've learned from a lot of those mistakes, and I'm still learning every single day. So I'm not necessarily the resident expert on trust because I know everything there is to do about trust. I am a student just like everybody else here.
Awesome.
I love that. I'm going to jump in here and just give you guys first of all, Terry is in the chat. Hey, what's up, Terry? And so for anybody who is also watching, feel free to say hello in the chat, and throughout the hour that we're together, feel free to chime in if there's anything that is a big aha moment, if you have any questions, if there's anything that resonates with you, or you have another story to share, we can include you in the conversation, and that would be awesome. Obviously, we have Rebekka here too, and I'm going to pass the baton to her in a little bit. But this month in the ASC, Accountability Success Circle, which Sam is also a part of, and has been a very active member. So you get to see her if you're not in the ASC currently, but if you are, then you'll get to see her face virtually. we have a focus each month based on our wheel of life. And this month is intimate relationships. And intimate relationships, a lot of times when you're in a committed partnership, you might think that to be, with your significant other. We also talk about intimate relationships as the relationship that you have with yourself, because at the very core, that is such an intimate relationship that only you can have. And we are going to dive into this conversation about trust, because as part of an intimate relationship, we need to have trust, whether it is trust with yourself, trust with a partner, trust with a friend, and those deep, in order to have a deep relationship and an intimate connection with somebody. And it doesn't necessarily always need to be a love connection, but in order to have that deep connection with somebody, you need to have trust. So we're going to start just kind of kicking it off and talking about what trust is and why it's so important. We're going to talk about the components that make trust be the trust that it is, or the components that make trust strong between either two people or yourself. We'll also talk about how to quickly build that foundation, right? Because trust is something that you need to work on. And so what are the things that you can do in order to build that trust with others and yourself? And then we will also talk about what happens when you don't have trust, or if you had trust and then you lost it. How do you get it back? How do you build it from the ground up? Especially when there is resistance in building that trust. So we'll go from there, but maybe we'll start with just why trust is so important. Who wants to start? Who wants to kick us off? Sam, do you want to? What have you learned?
I feel like trust is such an integral part of really anything else in a relationship. You can absolutely have some kind of relationship with other people without trust, but it's not going to be anywhere near close to what's possible with trust. You can love people from afar and not trust them. You can love people very deeply and closely and have trust with them too. The relationship and the dynamics change dramatically when they can trust you. And it's not also an all-encompassing thing. There are certain things that you may be able to trust somebody with, and things that you're just like, okay, this is a piece that I don't trust them with yet. And it's not something that just opens up immediately. It's something that's built over time, like any other relationship and anything else in our relationships. I started catching myself rambling, so that's why I cut myself off, so I could give you guys the floor.
You're good.
No, that was so good. And I'm like a definition. Maybe this is like the one part of me that could be an engineering sort of way of doing things. I'm like, tell me the definition. And so I looked it up. It said the firm belief in the reliability, truth, ability, or strength of someone or something. So to trust is to have that firm belief in the reliability and truth and ability. And so like the essential part of building strong relationships, I actually wanted to ask Sam, well, one, like this whole cuddle thing, yes, Gary kept the straight face, but I'm guessing I'm not the only one listening. Like, hold up, like, what is it that you actually do with this cuddling thing? And I'm thinking of strangers cuddling. I don't know if, strangers is the right word, but like to trust another person to allow for something like cuddling to happen. Could you share just a little bit on also how, like, what is this cuddle thing that you do and offer? And then also, where does trust even like fit into that? Maybe if there's anything to share.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So cuddle therapy is I work with adults that for some reason or another have something missing in their lives. And what I found is the common thread is some level of disconnect. It could be disconnect from the people around them. It could be disconnect from like burnout. It could be disconnect from grief. It could be literally anything, or things could be awesome in their life and they just want more touch. That's still like a literal physical disconnect. So people from all sorts of backgrounds that have some kind of disconnect in their lives, I work with, and we literally cuddle. But yes, you're right, Rebekka. There's like a huge amount of trust that's there because I'm literally trusting people with my body and to care for, at least to care for me and respect my body as they interact with it. So I'm not actually cuddling with strangers. And I say that because whenever I have somebody come in the door, or a new person I'm onboarding, I tell them usually within the first 5 seconds, there's this like look of, oh my God, what am I doing? I'm about to cuddle a stranger, from my clients who are hiring me. So I make a point to not be a stranger. When we first start, we don't just, it's not like when you go get a massage where you're like, okay, now I'm going to get out of the room, take your, dress down to your comfort level and lay down, and then I'll massage you, which when you think about it, that also requires a lot of trust. And we don't even think twice about doing that a lot of the times. But that's not really what we're doing here, because it's two-way touch. Not only are they like, am I touching them? They're touching me. I start with sitting and talking and getting to know the person that's here. And also all of the nervousness and awkwardness that comes with like, okay, I've just met this person and are we really just going to cuddle for like an hour plus together, starts to regulate once we're actually realizing that we're safe in this space here. I'm not going to do anything that they do not want me to do. And I can trust them to go at a pace that works for both of us. So there's a lot that happens there in that like first 5-10 minutes before we even like really interact with our bodies all that much. I mean, I'll obviously offer a hug when we first go in. That's what I will start with. But to go any further in the sense that we move from hugging and standing to laying down and like playing with each other's hair, holding each other around the shoulders, intertwining legs, like none of that really happens until we both feel comfortable and safe with that. And so it requires a huge ability to hold like a container for that, because my clients are also trusting me to hold them when things go haywire, because a lot of emotions come up and I need to be able to hold that as well. And I've had clients see other practitioners before and tell me that they stopped seeing them and they're afraid to bring emotions to me because they saw another practitioner and they said, well, I need you to not cry in our sessions. And I'm like, what?
Wow.
What? Absolutely. Like, I think I should buy stock in Kleenex at this point. I have so many tissues, like, please cry in my sessions. So it really requires a lot of that bringing out to let people know what they can trust from you as well. Side note, I'm also going through a huge rebranding because I realize a lot of my messaging doesn't highlight that as well as I would like. So it's very interesting to realize, like, I'm saying this and then also thinking back to the rebranding I'm doing. I'm like, oh, I should add that on my website somewhere. That would be a really good idea.
Good thing this is recorded.
Thank you. Does that answer your question,
Yeah.
Rebekka?
Yeah. And you it was a nice segue into the next kind of question or point of convo here of communication, and knowing that communication is key, and communication is more than just verbal. And so what I'm hearing, and you describe the way you work with people, communication does start to build the trust from the very beginning, whether it's the eye contact communication, the way you're managing your own physical awareness, the words that you're choosing to use, your tone, all of those ways of communication. So are there other key components or anything else within communication that comes up of just within trusting relationships? And Gary, you might have some more to chime in here too. So kind of feel free. Sam, I guess first with you, anything more in communication that you might share on, like, how does this add into like a trusting relationship? Any more than what you said before?
Yeah. One thing that comes up a lot, and I've noticed that I'm slowly getting better about bringing this to every interaction I have, is assuming positive intent from the get-go. I think it's very easy to hear something that relates to a time where you were wronged in the past, where it sounds like or seems like the same thing, and to immediately shut down. And that's when disconnection happens. This lack of trust starts to fade away. Whether it's right to do that or not, it might be, but if we can assume the positive intent so that we're not clouded by this idea of like, this is what's happening, this is what this person thinks of me, oh my goodness. I've seen that both as a practitioner and then also on my client's end, because inevitably at some point my clients may do something that I don't like and I have to say no. My job isn't just about saying yes to everything, every touch that they want. I have to. In fact, I have to do that very compassionately. But people have a really complex relationship with being told no, that they think that suddenly this means that they're the worst person ever. You're rejecting me personally as a human being. You're not just saying no to the action. So that separation of yes to the action, yes to the person, no to the action is essential in sessions with me. And I help people navigating that. Like, it's like, okay, I'm still here. I'm still connected with you. I don't want that action. How can we move and do another thing that works for both of us? And really just making the point that we're on the same team here. That's just one thing that's outside of what I can do. And it's nothing to do with you as a human being. You are still worthy. That was a very specific example. But.
Yeah, powerful. Yeah, boundaries coming in too, of course, with trusting yourself to then know how to communicate what you need and then give the other party space to communicate what they need and trusting themselves. And yeah, it's just this whole thing. April, Gary, anything worth?
You can go first if you have
communication components.
Yeah, Sam, I want to definitely highlight what you mentioned, coming from a place of non-judgment awareness and assuming positive intent. As you're building trust, we're going to make mistakes. And you bring up another good point on how someone, seemingly innocent sort of response or reaction might sort of trigger something in us from something completely different. And our sort of reaction, like sort of gut reaction, might be, from a place of triggered and stuff like that. And, just to pump the brakes and pause and just, sort of reflect on that and realize like, oh yeah, there are so many different ways to interpret things. So yeah, that is key for building trust, especially in newer relationships, because we all come with our own baggage and our own sort of history, and and we're setting the ground floor. And if we, I feel like if we can't separate that and start from scratch, it's going to be a challenge. And trust, in my opinion, trust is going to be never really established if we're always sort of referencing past experiences, and we can't let go of that and see this for something completely new.
Exactly. Because the person in front of you is a brand new person with their own lived experiences that may or may not be like ones that you've like experienced or seen before. You have no idea. I love that.
Yeah. Yeah. And to piggyback on that, I think it is important as the individual, like acknowledging the fact that, everybody comes with their own history and their own filters and all that stuff, understanding that sometimes what you may say or do, or your body language and how you're communicating, you may have an intention for it to be received one way, but it may not be received that way, just for the reasons that Gary was mentioning. And so making sure that the interpretation, even if it might seem a little, overboard, really making sure that you're connecting in agreement of what is actually being said and that it's being received the right way. And then also making sure that the words that are coming out of your mouth or the communication that's happening is backed up by action, right? You want to say that you're doing something and following that up with that consistent action, whether it is, movement with your body or making a commitment to, do something. So making sure that that's important. And then on top of that, the consistency of continually communicating and taking those actions and having that consistency so that you can continue to build trust. I think those are some big things for me, because you can say that you do something and do one thing, but then, in a separate instance, we could have a similar conversation and you're kind of, you've built trust over the previous instance, but if you don't have that continuity, you can, cause yourself to take steps back and say, wait, hold on a second. Now you're acting not how I envisioned you to. So now I don't know if I can trust that. So that's all I have to add on that. But I think that those are all components to how you can build trust and having trusting relationships, right? Because you need to be able to take those same trusting actions time and time again in order to really deepen and strengthen that relationship.
Can I add something to that? Yeah. So with my background being around some very awkward people, and also having been a very awkward person myself, with good intentions. I have noticed, not just for me, but for many of my friends that were in similar situations, that if they felt awkward or not really sure how to like be in a situation, like their body language, how they're like showing up, and like what was really interesting was like when their intention was really clear, a lot of those things could be completely like offbeat, just because they're like in their young like 20s or something, still trying to figure out how to show up and who they really are, but their intention was really clear about like how they wanted to be. It was okay, and like overall the interaction, it was easier for somebody to assume positive intent for what they were doing, even if it was a very awkward situation. So for example, I actually had a friend who I recently connected with recently, and it was very hard to not think of him in this way, but he very extroverted, very friendly, wanted to like know everybody's like life story, in a lot of ways somewhat of a male version of me. But he I used to go to dance events with him, and like he knew how to dance, but as soon as like his arms dropped, he was kind of just like almost to his sides, like I don't know what to do with my hands. But like he really wanted to talk to other people, so it was a little off-putting, and eventually he learned how to do that better. But the community did accept him, even though his way of being was a little bit awkward and hard to really read, because they saw that he was intentionally like trying to be like really understand other people and really be there for them, and like a genuine curiosity for them, and that came through.
Yeah. I love that example too. As soon as you mentioned dance, I was like, oh yeah, there's that embodies such trust too. Just to kind of piggyback on that little theme drop there, but it really does feel like that when you're getting into any sort of relationship with another, of kind of like stepping into trusting someone to know the moves and to be able to meet your energy. And maybe that's like I'm sure it doesn't always go well, like in that dance matchup, but just thinking of what that must feel like to really, and I'm going to loop this back to self-trust, because I think also going to the dance floor, it's like really knowing that you're going to trust yourself and your feet and your energy, and you're showing up on the floor. And then especially those styles of dance where the partners are not related, they're just kind of meeting up and honoring the dance, and so that kind of, I think, is a nice kind of meandering way, I guess, to get back to self-trust. And we've talked a lot about now communication and others, and even with people that we hardly know, people that we know. But when it comes to establishing a foundation of self-trust, I mean, I could talk on this just from the work I've been doing for a while with yoga and mindfulness, and really just developing an awareness of our own inner stuff first, and then living that outwardly. But even from everyone here, just different backgrounds, self-trust, like how do we start? What can people do? For listeners out there, like in those of you tuning in live, if you have any questions or chime-ins, please add in of, have you faced anything with trusting yourself? And I want to talk about trusting life as well, but there is just that thing of like, it all starts like really knowing yourself and having a way to, like, back to the definition I looked up of trusting, like the reliability of yourself. So say like want to make a move in something, like you've got to trust yourself first. So, I'll kind of cut myself off there, but I don't know, Sam, April, Gary, who might want to start, anything on self-trust that you can share, your own experiences, ways people can develop it, anything
Is it okay if I go first?
Please, April.
It is really interesting, because when I think about self-trust, as you're growing up as a child, right? Like you don't know how to trust yourself, and you really rely on and lean upon your parents, upon the, the environment that you're in, like the friends that, that you make as you're growing up. And you almost, in terms of self-trust, you kind of lean on that external validation to understand, like, am I doing the right things, right? And then as you get older, you kind of get to this point where you're like, at what point does this external, I may not be trusting myself, because I've been relying so much on that external, and there's definitely that shift as we grow where we have to learn how to trust. So I think it's really interesting, because I think that we don't really learn self-trust until later in life. I don't know if you guys agree with this at all, but like that's how I feel, because I feel like when I was younger, whatever was the right thing to do, and in order for me to trust myself, I had my mom tell me, or my dad tell me, or my friends tell me what I needed to do right. And I think the point when you start to claim that for your own is when you start that self-trust journey. And I think it's really important to know the difference. I feel like when you are able to release yourself from that external judgment and that validation, and trust your own intuition, and trust the decisions that you're making, like that is where that journey, and that's when you can start to really deepen. How to quickly do that, I don't know. I will defer to you guys, but that was just something that I have been thinking about in terms of like, when did I really start practicing self-trust? And I think that if I would have known earlier, or when, if I knew that things were, or, if I was kind of taught that a little bit more, or made aware that that was something where I needed to make those decisions more on my own to build that trust with myself, I wouldn't have started it as late in life. But so note for my children. But that's all I have to say.
If I can add on that, April, you bring up a good point about, later in life. In the work that I do, we call this like unlearning, because if you read the book, What to Say When You Talk to Yourself, early on in the book, they mentioned that by the time we're 18, we've heard the word no over 165,000 times. And I like to think as humans, in our smallest forms, we have intuition where where we think we know, what's right, but then because of various circumstances, the environment and what society thinks is right or whatever, we're conditioned to like act a certain way. And you're absolutely right, April. In those situations, it makes us second guess ourselves. Is like, am I doing this right? And if you have this desire to always do things right, you're going to be risk averse and not want to make a mistake. Again, who would want to make a mistake if every time you make a mistake, you're sort of criticized or whatever? So yeah, we look to the people around us for the cues. Is this right? And then after a certain point, we start to realize like, oh, wait a second. Maybe I do know what is right. So that's what I look at, and that's why it's called unlearning. Like unlearning all of those sort of behavior patterns that are sort of forced upon us, so that we can start to trust our intuition. Because at the end of the day, our intuition knows. It's just that when we were younger, it was a bit sort of wild, and it wasn't as focused. I remember I was in a coaching session, and we went through this thing called it was called human design. That's for another webinar and whatnot. But from that, one of the things on my chart was talking about that one of my sort of gifts that's on my chart is all along the lines of communication and being able to express myself. And then they talk about these gifts that you have. You've always had them. It's just that a lot of times when you were younger, those gifts got you in trouble. And so you stopped trusting those gifts. And then what you got to do is realize that, no, those are there for a reason. It's just that you just didn't know how to control those powers or those skills. And now as an adult, now it's time to unleash those. But it does take practice. And I feel like to get there, it's an ongoing sort of repetition of like putting yourself out there and then redefining what success is, because it's not going to be perfect. Like what Sam said, you're going to make mistakes, and realizing that that's okay.
I'm trying.
So I think someone was saying something.
I was trying to hold my tongue just because I have my own opinions around human design in particular. Once I found out where it originated from, I don't like it personally. It doesn't resonate with me. But also, I love the concept of like going back to being like who you were originally born as. And I think there's a lot of value of going back to where we were as kids. I mean, Carrie, you're kind of the expert on the panel here on like really going back to play, but I've been playing with this idea of I'm calling it like feeling your knowledge. Other people may look at it as like somatic knowledge, because I've noticed that I've started to really trust myself more when I'm actually paying attention to my body and what is happening in it and where it's guiding me. My body's very slow compared to my brain. I am neuroatypical, I have ADHD. It goes in like 10 million directions at once. I could easily lose track of my body because I'm just trying to track even 3 of the 300 thoughts that are running around in my head. So it takes a lot of effort to go back there. But I think as kids, we're really in tune with like what's happening in our body. Like think of like when kids cry, it's probably one of the first times they felt terrible thing about something. And it's the worst pain they've ever felt, because it probably is, because that's their first experience for it. So it makes sense. And yeah, we carry those for the rest of our life. But I've noticed that as an adult, as I start to pay attention more to like my body, there's a lot of cues that my body's giving me on what to do and what not to do and what it actually needs. I recently, I've gone through periods of sober curious, and this is probably the longest period now there. It's not like I'm not drinking at all anymore, but I've been like, if there's an interesting drink that like when I'm out, I might have it, but otherwise like, and I really haven't had a desire to drink. And I've noticed that like my body, like usually when I would have things going on where it's like, okay, well, I was going to go meet Noah, my boyfriend, at a bar after like he goes to the gym. And we both kind of just sat there for a moment. And then I was like, I don't want this actually. Can we just go home and like make a smoothie or something? That would feel a lot better. And yeah, I think it takes a lot of trust to feel comfortable in the body and to listen to your body. I think other people might describe that as like go with your gut, which I don't always feel it in my gut. Usually it's somewhere else in the main trunk area. But I think the more I can pay attention to what my body's doing, I can figure out what it's trying to tell me, rather than try to spend all my time here, because that gets me in trouble sometimes, even though I really like spending time here in my head. There's a lot of cool things that happen there. There's a lot more value and wisdom in the body for me to be able to tap into.
Oh yeah, don't even get me started.
Oh, please unleash,
This is
Rebekka.
this is the place to
This is
do
your
it of all
jam.
places.
For sure. Sure. No, well, I mean, it's like you're speaking my language with the, somatics and the body but to keep it like reeled in on the trust piece. Yeah. And you mentioned the trusting your gut. And I mean, there is like, and yes, Sam, everything you shared, like, thank you for going there. And I think too, the thing with the sober curious, which is real interesting because it's a thing right now. And there are people seriously getting sober or entertaining the idea, or like for me, I'm kind of the same, where I don't label it anything, but just like I think I have been more sober in the last few years than, not that I ever drank a bunch, but I really don't want it. And I'm even clearer than ever in my body, go figure, because alcohol is poison that we put into us that numbs a lot of things down, including our mind. And when it comes to the nervous system being mind and body, it's all so linked. And so I think that right now too, there's a lot of people that are experiencing probably more feelings of trust and knowing, because they are choosing to do things differently for the first time in a long time, even just like drinking less alcohol. And you can still drink alcohol, and I'm a big believer in it can bring you joy and do the things if you use it as in those right ways. But that being said, like the just trusting the body, and this goes for the listeners right now, like how does your body talk to you? And just like Sam said, it might not be in the gut specifically. There is a direct link between your gut and your brain because of how we were formed when we were a little embryo. The linings of our gut and brain were linked, and then we grew into a body and they got separated, but it's the same conversation happening in both. And so feelings in your gut can definitely be a direct link to what's going on in the brain, and vice versa. So there is just a lot to be said for that true bond that's there. Or people with a lot of gut issues these days, more than ever, people have gut issues, and no wonder, because there's so much stress. And there's also kind of this disconnect that's pretty common too, that I think is getting better, of people learning how to trust the body versus just live in their head. But with that, I think trust and the body, I mean, they are like a key thing here. Like when it comes to self-trust, learning how to listen to the body and trust the body. And I think in the simplest way, first, depending on what each of us has been through in our whole lives, it can be very challenging to feel safe, to drop in, and to, whether it's to actually touch another, or even just to be in communication with another. So to really just honor our own individual journeys and where we're at, or what we might have carried forth from our ancestors and parents and all of it. So it's all living in the body. And so to learn how to trust could be one, just to like have this new idea, if this is new, to like, how am I in my body? And if those trust radars are living somewhere from the neck down, how do we make that neck down feel available, comfortable, safe, so it can start to talk to us a little bit more? And I do think the main voice of trust is there. The mind is great. And like you said, Sam, it's like the intellect is awesome. And I came across this at some point in the last month. I forget specifically where I read it, but it was coming from this like yoga meditation, thousands of years of these ancient practices speaking to that. The mind is for intellect, but the body is for the wisdom and the true intelligence. And so even just in random day-to-day things of like, how do I trust myself to make the right decision for even just like, what do I want to wear today? What food do I want for lunch? It's like, sometimes it's so easy to overthink anything, but to learn how to really trust, oh, do I want this or this? And it might be so fuzzy, like the radar signal, like so faint, but it's there, and like, oh, I actually want that. And I think even those practices of then answering that inner call and then say it's what you want for lunch, like, oh, I actually feel really called to that, even though my brain's telling me that would be healthier, like I really want this right now, like whatever. And you eat that and it feels really good. And it's like, those are little practices of building self-trust, of like answering that own truth and trust within, taking action on it. And when it turns out well, which it will, if it's coming from that deep, right place, or whatever you want to call it, I think just those add up. And so time after time, the more we can access the body, make decisions from the body, and then get on the other side of that decision and feel the return or the reward or whatever, like a habit loop, like, and then trust becomes, the bigger trust things can happen, but it all starts so small. And the last thing I'll say to that is, even just if people like, I'm not feeling my body here, I don't know, it's like, I'm always up here. It's like, just even simple touch, like even just being like, here's my arm. Oh, here's my arm. Here are my legs. Oh, I have feet, wiggling the toes. It's so simple, but like, that's one of the best ways. And even like hugging, if you're there, just like getting to a place where you can hug yourself, or a couple breaths. And these little things will start to open up that channel to that, accessing that truthful, trustful place. So anyway,
100%.
I'll stop myself, but
100%. And shameless plug, if you're a person that wants to actually try to do that, but would prefer to have another person around so that you can decide how much you trust yourself in your own body, that's a really good reason to hire a cuddle therapist.
right on. That's great. Anybody else have any tips on self-trust? Any of you here do have little practices that you can think of? Like, how have you developed ways to trust yourself? Or is it still something that's like,
I think did you say you paint?
Oh, I was going to say I have a game.
Oh, you have a game? Yeah, let's hear the game. Sam.
Let's play it.
In fact,
Wait,
we
can
want to play it? Yeah, we can absolutely play it. If we'll give it like 3 minutes or something. Could one of you do a timer? So it's a very simple game. It's called the I want game. We're literally going around and finishing the sentence stem I want, and start with like the present moment, and then as it becomes your turn, just like anything else that comes up. It could be unrealistic. I've played this before with somebody, and what was it? It was a woman, and she was just like, I want to not be the mother of a teenage daughter. And it was like, oh, okay. So you can ask for unrealistic things. You can ask for world peace, with the intention that none of us are responsible for necessarily fulfilling that for you either. You can just want it. And so I find that really helpful, just to be like, even just speaking into existence, like, that's a want that I have. But I'm curious what will come up for all of us if we try this. Actually, would you guys 3 be open for that?
We got Terry.
Yeah,
in
we
chat
put
too. Maybe
chat.
he'll.
Yep.
Maybe
Yeah,
he'll.
what order are we gonna do? We're gonna do. I can start, and then let's say April, Gary, Becca, and then I'll come back around.
Perfect.
Oh, did Terry want to participate? Terry, you can.
We just
say,
put him in the chat.
He's in the chat. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so we good?
Yeah.
is it the idea to say quickly, like don't think about it
Yeah.
too long,
Yeah,
just kind of,
try to say it relatively quickly. Yeah, so I want a stick of deodorant in my cuddle room.
I want sleep.
I want a massage.
I want a chocolate smoothie, I'm thinking of.
I want a lighter laptop.
I want to work less?
I want more sun.
So I was going to say, I want more sun in California.
What do I want? Yeah, I want some tea.
I want, oh shoot. My sore throat to go away. Terry said, I want time back.
Yeah.
And I want something refreshing to drink.
I want more money.
I want to know what my plans are for the holidays well before the week of the holiday.
I want certain people to communicate. I'll leave it at that. I think all of you know what I'm talking about. But anyways.
Yeah. I want more space.
I want.
And Terry wants a motorcycle, FYI.
Nice.
I want a better, homier yoga studio in California.
I want a reliable dog walker.
I want to go on more vacations, even though I'm going on one Thursday, but more.
I want more sleep.
Say, I also want more vacations.
I want to swim more often.
I want.
Time, by the way.
We'll maybe we'll finish this round.
Okay.
Terry says, I want to watch a sunset by the beach. I say, I want the rain to stop so I can run 6 miles today.
Oh, I want a hug, since we've been talking all about these cuddle things. That's fun.
I want some new clothes.
Love that. Should we stop there? Do we go all the way around?
And that was the last one, right?
Yeah.
Sam, do you have one more?
I want to be able to control the temperature in my cuddle room. I work in a giant building, so that they just have master temperature controls.
That was fun.
I forget why I said this exercise was helpful, but hopefully the intention is clear for those watching, that speaking what you want helps you figure out, like, okay, being honest with yourself, at least being like, yeah, some of them are very small. We heard a lot of small shares as we were going around, and some of them were a little bigger, and at least admitting to ourselves that we want them I think is a great starting point.
I agree. Yeah, and it's definitely a trust game. How I'm interpreting this is, starting to tap into like those signals that Rebekka mentioned. Because far too often I feel like we are told to take up less space and to stop asking for things. And if we have like this environment where it's like, yeah, what do you want? There's no too small or too big. It starts to hone in on that signal.
Mm-hmm. Any other tips? April, do you have any self-trust?
I don't know if I trust myself completely, so like I will opt out of this. I'm still working on it very, very hard. Oh, Terry also said I want to paint from my imagination for
Awesome. And he said it was helpful. One thing I will add, it's similar to like the I want game. One of the reasons that I read why we have a challenge with self-trust is that we're not as decisive as we can be for whatever reason. So as a way to start to build that, a mentor of mine said, one, to keep things simple, because a lot of times we have overwhelming to-do lists and X, Y, and Z. And he said, make a decision list. 3 decisions you need to make today. And again, it can be simple decisions or complex decisions, and then do them. Challenge yourself to do them and cross them off. That's why he says 3. So it's just 3 simple things. But the main thing is that it's not all about being right and getting it right, but it's all about the act of doing. Because in the act of doing, you're going to quickly learn. Because again, going back to when we were kids, that's how we learned by doing things. And whether it was right or wrong, like that's how we got better. So that is one way of increasing. One, he mentions it increases your confidence, because if you can be a person who decides, you can be more confident, and then you have greater self-trust. So it's a great exercise to try, especially if you're in a situation where you need to grow in that area.
Mm-hmm. I like that. Just the decisiveness, taking action. Yeah, I think that's a key way to build trust. Like, we won't know if we just, I think Tony Robbins says, in your head, you're dead. There's a point where we just have to like get moving, instead of just spinning it all. Yeah, so you kind of hinted on that, April, too, of like lacking, like the downside of lacking trust and what to do when trust is lost, whether that's like something with resistance or resentment might show up, or inauthenticity, various ways things might show that there's like some lacking trust. So anyone care to go into like what happens when we've either lost trust or when trust is lacking? Any steps or tips or stories? Sam, do you have anything on when trust is lost? Any advice? Yeah.
I had a bad falling out last year with someone in the cuddle community, and it was a result of a couple different things. And in the end, I just actually decided that it was actually better to sever things, which was kind of a little bit different from like what we're deciding here. But in this case, I would probably say the first one, depending on the severity of the trust break. The first decision is it important? No, not important. Does it make sense to try to regain that trust, or does it make sense to grieve the loss of that trust? And in this case, I decided that I had to grieve the loss of that trust, because not only did this person lash out at me for something I said, which goes back to something April said earlier, that I picked the words I picked did not land well with this person. They took them to a very extreme level, did not assume positive intent on my end either, but then made a point to try to do damage and emotional damage to me and harm me for what I said. So I had to look at that and evaluate, like, is it time to grieve? And especially because this person did say that they didn't want to ever hear from me again. The chance to be able to repair that trust directly is gone. So I had to grieve that connection is not only is the trust gone, the connection is gone. So that was high stakes in that particular situation. So if you're a person that's dealt with something like that, where it is a very like high situation where like the connection is gone, not just the trust, I feel for you. I get that. And it sucks. I don't know if I'm allowed to pseudo swear on here. Oops.
Let's say whatever you want.
All right. It sucks. It absolutely sucks. And at the same time, at that point, you may have to accept that this is what has happened. And if you're not able to repair trust with them, can you trust yourself? Can you go back to you? That's the person that you have the relationship with still, even if the other person's disconnected from you. So that's the best thing I can always offer is, can you still trust yourself despite what has happened? So I kind of went in for the kill with like a very intense situation. If you want to lighten it up a little bit with a less intense situation, please do.
I mean, I think it's hard because when you lose trust, a lot of times, if it is a little bit more surface level, I think it's very easy to let it go, right? If you trusted somebody and then they did something that was, didn't match the integrity that you had for that person, you can just kind of say, okay, I'll either choose to sweep it under the rug and pretend it didn't happen. I can choose to just say, nope, I'm done, I let it go, or you can work on trying to rebuild that trust if you care to. But I feel like, the instances when trust is lost, they come with such heaviness. As you were talking, Sam, I mean, I have been going through, years ago, I had to grieve the loss of trust with a friend who I haven't spoken with in almost 10 years. And that was somebody who was in my core circle and is no longer. And there was a lot of emotions, the anger and the resentment, and then trying to grieve and accept. And, the person is still alive, but the relationship is essentially dead. And so how do you move on? And when you choose to go the route of grieving. But I also am thinking too, there's certain times when you might have a relationship where trust is lost, but you're not able to let go because of the nature of the relationship. I think, this happens a lot in family dynamics, where, there are things that you wouldn't necessarily be forgiving, or you would just, break the trust and not rebuild it because it was just somebody that you're willing to grieve versus somebody who is, core to your being. And, if you prioritize family and still want that, you need to be able to either figure out how to trust again, or like Sam was saying, figure out how to trust yourself in those moments with the actions that you're going to take. And so I think, the first key to everything is awareness, but making sure that, you answer the question for yourself, like, is trying to rebuild the trust worth it? And what's it going to take? Because I think when you have trust and then you lose it, it's that much harder to build trust than if you had a clean slate and you were starting over, unless you agree to start from a clean slate, which some people can't always do. So
can I highlight something you said, April?
Was it bad?
No, it's a good thing. No, I loved it. I loved just trying to figure out how you can trust somebody again. And I want to almost tease that apart, because it doesn't mean that we have to do something so that we can trust somebody again with the same exact thing if they haven't learned their lesson. We can't control that. And I'm taking the position here that, assuming that we are the one that has lost trust for the person.
Mm-hmm.
So I have found it a little bit helpful to almost be like, okay, what can I trust this person with? Mm-hmm. So for example, one of my clients, she got completely dysregulated because she met a new friend and they were supposed to hang out, and this person cannot be on time or commit to plans to save her life. Several times I've heard stories of these people trying to make plans, and they push back an hour and push back an hour and push back an hour, and not today, not today, not today. After they already was like, yes, I'm definitely coming today. Oh, now I'm not actually. And it was just like, okay, so you trust this person with your feelings when you do hang out, but you can't trust them to commit to things on time like you want them to. Those are two different types of trust. So while it might be hard to have a relationship with them because you can't trust them to actually show up when they say they will, you can trust them when they actually are present. So that, I think, navigating that is helpful. I would tell that if it was my choice, I would have been like, client, you need to stop worrying about this person. They're never going to be on time. But if it was like a family member where they really can't avoid that, they still need to figure out what can I trust them with? How can I trust them if not this way? So I really liked that, April.
Yeah, and this random thoughts just kind of, want to go?
No, go ahead.
Okay, it's a quick one, but even just if people are listening and thinking whether they've had some broken trust, whether on whatever end of the spectrum, the situation might have been, and it can be hard to rebuild that. And yes, to connecting with yourself again. And there's also a lot of power in modeling, looking around and looking at whether it's a friendship, a relationship, the way someone that you know moves through the world, like what are some examples that can rebuild your faith in the fact that there are trustworthy people, there are trustworthy friendships, there are trustworthy relationships, and like just reminding yourself from the outside in sometimes can be really valuable. And like, okay, that does exist, because I know I've heard, and I've probably done it myself, of like, oh, what do I do now? There's no one out there, there are no friends for me, you know, it's like whatever. But there are actually fantastic, and it can also be fictional. This is some of the work that I've done with the somatic, you know, nervous system healing, but there's a lot of power in that. It could be a movie character, it could be something that is fictional, but if it brings and invokes that feeling of I want, that is trust to me, or that is the friendship that I want, and that is how I want, you know, my partner to be, like that, if it feels right to you in that moment, you know, it's back to you, you know, and you can gauge it from there. So sometimes that modeling can really be helpful, even though it's a lot of, you know, live life from the inside out, but the outside in can also help, I think, in those situations where we've been a little like jolted from like, who do I even, you know, where do I even look anymore, and realize that there are probably examples all over that you can at least for a moment take what you can from those models that you like and respect, that feel right.
Especially the part about, you know, finding examples in any place you can get, even if it's in a fictional situation. That's a really good one. What I was going to add came from Brene Brown. She used this really great analogy of a trust jar. Like, you know, you can actually have a physical one if you want, but, you know, it's usually like a metaphoric thing where, you know, say you lost all the trust. Imagine like marbles is an incident, you know, of trust, and maybe someone did something to like sort of remove all those marbles. So now, you know, going back to, you know, what Sam mentioned is like, all right, what can we, you know, start to trust in them, and then start to, you know, it's going to take time, but, you know, what are the elements that they did, you know, that showed that they were in integrity and stuff like that, and this is going to require us to realize that we have biases, and one specific one is a confirmation bias, in that we often, you know, if we have this thing that we deem to be true, we try to find the things to support that, you know, that thought, that thesis. And so we have to, you know, realize that, yes, someone may have done something to, like sort of, I wouldn't necessarily say ruin, but, you know, injure, you know, the trust. And, you know, we have to like consciously say, all right, I need to look for reasons that, you know, if you want to restore the relationship, you know, look for reasons to trust them again, and know that it's going to take time, and just imagine like everything that they do that shows that their integrity and they're accountable, stuff like that, is one more marble in the jar. And, you know, at some point, you know, it's going to get to the point where like, oh, all right, cool, we've rebuilt this. And that's the beautiful thing about, you know, this is that we're flawed. You know, we all have mistakes, and as Sam mentioned, you know, sometimes, you know, we do things that we don't even know that, you know, people get mad about, and vice versa. And if it's something that we, you know, want to cherish, you know, we have to put in the work. And another thing for Brene Brown that I like to share is, it's from her book, Braving the Wilderness. It's The Quest for True Belonging and the Courage to Stand Alone. That's the full title. And it's an acronym, and it's the 7 elements of trust. And we sort of covered all of them in our time together. And I just love how Brene Brown can, you know, put things together in a beautiful acronym. And it's called Braving. And the B is for boundaries. You know, you respect your boundaries, I respect mine, vice versa. And being aware when those boundaries are broken, and being able to call that out. The other one is reliability. You're going to say what you know, you're going to do what you say you're going to do. And, you know, being aware of like your ability to do stuff. And when you're like sort of overextended. Accountability is you own your mistakes, you apologize, you make amends, again, because, you know, we're not perfect. And then, you know, you sort of get your sort of ego out of the way, and realize like, oh yeah, I made a mistake. And a true apology is, you know, admitting that you were wrong, and stating it, and then stating, you know, what are you going to do to make amends. And then vault, this is a big one that Brene talks about, is that you don't share information or experiences that are not yours to share. And so that is for that relationship in general, and then just in general, because it's one of those things where it's an unconscious thing. You know, if you're someone that is sharing stuff that is not yours to share, and it is not, it's with someone else, they're going to be like, hey. And it was funny, I was coaching someone, and they were talking about this, where they were like, I just have a hard time trusting this person because they're always gossiping about these other people. And how do I know that they're not gossiping about me to others? And so that's a big one, the vault, just keeping personal things private and whatnot. And then integrity, Brene Brown talks about choosing courage over comfort. For me, I say integrity is like, yeah, you do what you're going to say, what you're going to do, and you stand in that. And then the big one that Sam mentioned is non-judgment. We can both ask for what we need and not worry about being judged for that. And then generosity is that I think that place of assuming positive intent. You extend the most generous interpretation possible to the intentions, words, and actions of others. So anyways, we've talked about all of those, but it's nice to put like a little bow on it and have like an acronym about establishing trust. And Brene Brown she's an expert at that.
I love that. I love that without looking at it, we were all talking about it. So it's like we instinctively know what it takes to be able to build trust. And maybe that's a part of our own self-trusting, knowing, what has made us feel good in the past, what has made us feel burned and scorned in the past, where we may have, said things that made other people uncomfortable, but just being aware of all of those things, I feel, are huge. And I love how, you don't even think about the accountability piece. And I was like, oh, it's like the ASC. But, I think making sure that you own up to, your actions and apologize where needed. And, but that's a huge thing that's needed in order to like really establish a deeper connection with somebody. So yeah.
I also want to highlight, and I appreciate you sharing this, Gary, that I totally broke one of those things on this call when you were sharing them. I was like, oh wow, yeah, I totally messed up in real time. So guess what? If you're still trying to figure out how to do it perfectly, I'm a great example. I'm still figuring it out too.
What did you do? I didn't.
Oh, I shared a client experience that wasn't to share.
Oh.
I have a feeling that I don't have explicit consent for that, but I do have an idea that she would have been okay with me sharing it. So I'm going to check on that though. So thank you, Gary, for bringing that to my awareness. I need to be careful about when I'm on a Zoom call that no, it's not always a closed loop of my practitioners when I'm on the Zoom call. Like this is actually on YouTube now.
Awesome.
So thank you.
Yeah, we make mistakes and it's all good.
Yeah.
But yeah, we have. Is there any other last words? I know we're up on time. I'm going to check the chat really quick. Terry was saying, yay for nuanced boundaries. The last thing he said. But yeah, if we're all good, then this was an amazing conversation. I think we got really vulnerable. We shared a lot of insight. And I think that that's another thing. I think trust involves or requires some vulnerability, right? I don't think we could really have this type of conversation without, sharing things that, haven't worked out the way we wanted to or whatnot. So making sure that if you want to be trusted, that you are able to share that level of vulnerability with others. And so that said, I think we're going to wrap it up. But Rebekka, thanks for helping lead the discussion. Sam, thanks so much for being here. Gary, thanks for being you. And
thank you
whatever about me, but
thank you.
This wraps up episode number 46. We have done 46 of these. Next month we will be doing what's our focus? I think it's social relationships, right? So we'll have a webinar in the month of July. So stay tuned. If you are not subscribed to my YouTube channel, you can, so that you don't even need to know when. It'll just notify you when that's there. If you are in the Accountability Success Circle, you see it in the events calendar with all of the details. And for those of you that are not part of the ASC and want to know more, come check us out at www.accountabilitysuccesscircle.com. All right, we good? We'll see you next month. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Later.
Bye.
And just everybody just keep waving while I try to figure out how to end the